Welcome back to the southern Botswana town of Jwaneng, host to the 2023 TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race. Last week we brought you the first installment of our desert race coverage, and now it's time to tell the remainder of the story. Join us as we go through the action, proudly brought to you by the SARRC in association with Toyota, Ford and Pirelli. The desert race has always been the big one, the crown jewel in the Southern African Rally Raid Championship. This year the event's full name is the TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race, and the event was back in Botswana for the first time since 2019. And back in Jwaneng since last visiting in 2018. Last week we showed you where the chips fell after the Pirelli qualifying race, as well as the first full day of racing in each class. This week it's time to bring you the conclusion of the 2023 desert race, as we take a close-up look at the action from Jwaneng. But first, a quick reminder. The TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race is round 3 of the 2023 SARRC. And due to its status as the only true marathon event on the calendar, the desert race offers 1.5 points of the normal SARRC events. As such, it is a pivotal race in the season and comes not only with the added points, but also the bragging rights associated with the toughest automotive event on the African continent. Let's pick up on the action where we left off last week, starting with Class T1. When the dust had settled over the tough opening day of the 2023 desert race, it was the names of Eben Basson and co-driver Leander Pienaar who topped the standings. The pair had a small but meaningful lead over Johan and Sean van Staden, who trailed the Team Hilux pairing by just about 4 minutes in their Renault Duster. Johan de Bruin and co-driver Gerard Schutte were in third place in their Redline Revo, with Jaden Els and Alvin Vonk in fourth, and Daniel Schroeder and Ryan Bland rounding out the top 5. As the late great Murray Walker would have said, anything can happen, and it often does. We caught up with Basson prior to the start of the final days of racing in Jwaneng.
Yeah, we're fortunate where we are. We're happy. We had a good run yesterday afternoon. We made up some bit of time there, so we just have to keep it there now.
Up until just a little over 2 years ago, when the Class T1 Plus cars arrived, these, dare we call them normal Class T1 cars, were the pinnacle of the sport. The same car that won the Dakar in 2019. And these are also some of the best drivers the country has to offer. So although Class T1 might not be the premier class anymore, the battles in this class are world class to say the least. And speaking of world class, drivers like Daniel Schroeder and Class T points leader Nick Pienaar are indeed world class drivers. But unfortunately for them, their desert race aspirations were cut short when both crews were forced to retire from the final day of the 2023 event. Gerard and Rooney Heinlein were classified 7th despite surviving a few mechanical issues in their Redline VK56, and were no doubt happy with finishing their first ever Toyota Desert race. But perhaps not as happy as Dutch teenager Pim Klaassen, with local lad Wade Harris reading the notes in the Redline VK50. After experiencing gearbox troubles the day before, the young Dutchman had to find his way through the field in order to record his first ever national race finish on African soil. And speaking of a finish, the two Blicknow brothers from Witbank, Fouchier and Battis, have made quite a name for themselves since joining the sport only just more than a year ago. The Team Hilux Rally Raid squad has been fast, but good point scoring finishes have been hard to come by. And after rolling their Hilux during qualifying 2 days ago, it seemed like a finish would once again avoid them. But the pairing drove well, especially on the final day, to record their first ever desert race finish in a fine 5th position. Round 1 winners Johan de Bruin and Gerard Schutte started the final day 3rd in class, but the Redline Revo crew had a determined young Jaden Els in their rearview mirror for most of the Sunday of the race. The youngster with Alvin Vonk reading the notes in the King Price Extreme SVR is as fast as they come and started the day with the brain firmly in his sights. What followed was a great battle between youth on the one side and life experience on the other. On this occasion, it was the youth of Els that triumphed over the Pretoria businessman. Els also claimed the Road to Dakar prize in the process, But more about that a little later. Believe it or not, but this scrap was only for third place, as the father and son pairing of Johan and Sean van Staden found themselves in no man's land for most of the race. No man's land meaning they were too far ahead of third place to be challenged, and too far from the lead to challenge for a win themselves. Even so, the old dog brought their Renault Duster home after 3 grueling days and 1,000 kilometers through the Kalahari Desert to claim second place in Class T1. And you clearly don't have to be a rally raid expert to work out how things panned out at the top of the standings when the flag was waved to indicate the end of the race. Besides a few flat tires along the way, it was a near perfect weekend for the Team Hilux rally raid crew of Urban Basson and Leander Pinot. The pairing won the Pirelli qualifier, ended the Saturday in the lead, and extended that margin to a full 10 minutes at the end of the race. An emphatic victory for the defending Class T champions in Botswana. There it is, the official Class T1 results after 1,000 kilometers of racing through the desert surrounding the town of Zhoneng, with 10 minutes the winning margin for Basson over the Van Stadens, with Els and Fong claiming the final spot on the Class T1 podium. De Bruyn just missed out on a podium, with the Blicknose claiming 5th. It's always a great time to celebrate a podium finish, but nowhere else is it as special as here in Zhoneng, in front of thousands of appreciative fans. The taste of victory must have been bittersweet, especially for Urban Basson and Leander Pinot.
And it's awesome, to be a crowd like this, and the guys are supportive, and it's just crazy now. It's nice to see how these guys have the spirit for the racing. It's awesome.
In Class T of the SARRC, only 3 cars took the starters' orders for day 1 of the desert race in Zhoneng. But by the time the sun set over the southern mining town, that number had reduced to just 2. As Bernard and Minette Johnston in their Neil Woolridge Motorsport Ford Ranger fell by the wayside. This left Hendrik Du Plessis and co-driver Heinrich Du Plessis well in control of the class in their Ford Ranger, with Skalkberger and Henk Janse van Vieren lagging by 31 minutes and 30 seconds in their King Price Extreme Volkswagen Amarok. With the desert race being a proper marathon event, it is possible to take a hefty time penalty for not finishing a leg of the race and still record points for a finish at the end of the event. And this is precisely what the Johnston couple did. With a 20-hour penalty, they were never going to fight for a win. But when the luckless Skalkberg and Henk Janse van Vieren encountered a broken input shaft in their King Price Extreme Volkswagen Amarok just 90 kilometers from the end of the grueling race, the Johnstons' determination were rewarded with a second-place finish. This meant that father and son Hendrik and Heinrich Du Plessis took a flag-to-flag victory in their Ford Ranger, after taking the lead on Friday and staying out in front when the checkered flag was waved. Time to celebrate not only reaching the end, but to do so from the podium in Zhoneng.
To win it on your first go, it's a special thing, especially when you do it with your boy as well. So yeah, nice one.
And this is what Class T standings looked like after the completion of the 2023 desert race, with the Du Plessis finishing at the top ahead of the Johnstons, with the names Berger and Janse van Vieren unfortunately disappearing from the leaderboard. 3 of the 7 Class G cars that started the desert race had been sidelined after the first full day of racing. While some of them would start again on the final day, only 4 cars remained in contention for overall victory. At the head of the field was Jeff Minott and Newsem co-driver Rodney Mumbles-Burke. The pair had a 16-minute lead in their hydropower Can-Am Maverick, with Glenn Theron and Craig Galvin in second place in their Motonetics machine. Ewald van Rensburg and Johan Skeppers were just over 13 minutes behind the third-placed crew, while Ian and Vanna Mostert found the going tough, but still held on to 4th place on the table. We had a chat with Class G leader Minott prior to the start of the final day of the year's desert race.
You know, it was tough yesterday. It was what side-by-sides are made for, lots of tight, twisty stuff. So from that point of view, it was great.
Minott, as well as the rest of the remaining Class G crews, had their work cut out for them on the final day of the Fiat TGRSA desert race. These little cars are both quick and tough, but 1,000 kilometers through the Botswana desert race can be even tougher. The rate of attrition was high, with the desert claiming several Class G victims on the final day, including Ewald van Rensburg and Johan Skeppers, as well as Francois de Witt and Pierre Jordan. In the end, the Mostert, with son Ian playing the chauffeur for Father Vanna, took their 10-hour penalty for failing to finish on the Saturday, but reached the end of Sunday's proceedings. The Motornetics racing crew also claimed the final step on the podium in the process. It was a good race in the end for the Motornetics team, as their second car, the one in the hands of Glenn Toron and Craig Galvin, finished the race in a fine second position after a relatively event-free run on the Sunday. And what a fairy tale for Jeff Winnett in a minute. The old dog came to Botswana with an experienced but new-to-him navigator in the form of Rodney Mumblesberg and never looked back. Despite a few issues here and there, the hydropower equipment Can-Am was never troubled throughout the whole weekend, with Minute now adding a flag-to-flag desert race victory to his long list of achievements. He was happy, to say the least.
You know what? It's such fun out here. Today was like the old barber spawn. It was just amazing. Beautiful route, beautiful spectators, great organizers.
The Class G standings tell a story in its own, with only 3 crews classified as finishers following 1,000 kilometers throughout the desert. Minute topped the standings ahead of Tehran and the Mosterts. This brings us to the crews fighting it out in Class A of the SARRC, where the harsh Kalahari brush had taken its toll on the field. Only 2 cars officially made it onto the results board, with John Thompson and Maurice Zamatin showing their class at the top of the standings in their SARRC Challenger. Their nearest challengers were Lourdes du Preez and Junior Vardy, piloting the Farmers Meat Striker. But Thompson's lead was just over 2 hours, and all the experienced crew had to do was finish the race.
There's not much I can say. I love the desert race. We've always enjoyed it. Botswana, the spectators are absolutely phenomenal.
This was the final day of the 2023 TGRSA Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race. The name is a mouthful, and trying to manhandle one of these Class A special vehicles on narrow sandy tracks through the bush can be a handful. On this occasion, the test proved too tough for no less than 4 of the 7 Class A starters, with locals Mohamed Noor and Ahmed Hussein failing to reach the finish. The same could be said of both Andrew Makaneta and Eugene Bierman. So a finish on the desert race came with a guaranteed podium position. But in what order? For once defending Class A champions Timmy Howes and Gary Campbell would not be in a position to fight for a victory, as they so often do. Howes took the 10-hour penalty for not completing the Saturday's part of the event, but fought back on Sunday to finish 3rd overall. A finish in itself is worth a lot in the desert, so Lourdes du Preez and Junior Vardy would have been satisfied with their 2nd place finish, even though a few niggles in the desert prevented them from joining the fight for the lead. The Class A lead, however, was never in question, with the veteran pairing of John Thompson and Maurice Zamatin dominating the event in the SARRC Challenger. It was a solid performance from the crew over all 3 days of racing. The special vehicle category also consists of less but still powerful and fast Class P machines. The desert took its toll on these machines, but after 1,000 kilometers of racing, there were 2 crews classified as finishers of the renowned desert race. In first position, the CRT of Quinton Lessing and Brendan Smith, who completed the race in 14 hours and 25 minutes, comfortably ahead of the crew who claimed 2nd place, Khalil Hussein and Andre Geldenes. And these were the official standings for Class A and P at the end of the desert race. The names of John Thompson and Maurice Zamatin remained on top of Class A, ahead of du Preez and Vardy, with champions Howes and Campbell collecting the points that came with 3rd. Lessing and Smith took Class P, ahead of Hussein and Caldenes. Time for the experienced crew of Thompson and Zamatin to once again enjoy the sweet taste of victory from the top step of the podium. Something which they've done several times over many years, and something that a racer can never get tired of.
It's been a lovely weekend. We really have enjoyed it. The Botswana people are amazing. The spectators here are just probably the best in Africa.
And finally, onto the big boys and the big-wheeled machines of Class T1+. This is the ultimate class of the SARRC, where the cars conform to the FIA's rally raid rules and where the TGRSA squad has ruled the roost of the recent past. But a quick look at the standings after the qualifying race, as well as the first 2 race loops of the desert race, shows that everything didn't always keep going right for Toyota. The names at the top of the standings were problematic for the hosts, as they both ended in Woolridge. Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer were shooting the lights out with a 3-minute 6-second lead over brother Lance and his co-driver Kenny Gilbert. And in case you missed it, both these crews were fielding NWM Ford Castrol Rangers, not Toyotas. With that said, the next 3 cars were all from the TGRSA squad, and they were clearly lined up to pounce should anything happen at the head of the field.
I've never come into the last day in the lead, so yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of pressure.
This was a great moment for team principal Neil Woolridge, but the former competitor was cautious to be too optimistic.
So we're in a good position. We've won the prologue and won the first day, but it's no use winning all the battles and not the war. So today's the war. We need to get through today unscathed.
Across the way at TGRSA, team principal Glenn Hall was realistic about his team's chances, but he was clearly also hungry to go racing.
If they can do it, great. If they can't, then they must bank the points, because the desert rate's 1.5 points, so we don't want to lose points here.
But the man with probably the most pressure on the day was Henk Lategan, TGRSA's great hope for a win. The former champion knew that he had a massive task ahead of him, but was clearly quite concerned about the challenge that lay ahead.
The team has given us everything, or all the tools we need to be able to do it. It is a big gap, and we have to overtake both cars on the road and pull a gap.
With that said, it was time to go racing on the final day of the 2023 Desert Race in Zhuaneng. This was it. The day that stood between a number of protagonists and the sought-after desert race crown. It is the race that all drivers want to win most, but as with any other race, there can be only one. Add to that the age-old rivalry between the red team and the boys in blue, plus the added drama contained in the so-called sponsor's curse. And the final day of the 2023 TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race had all the ingredients in place to make for an epic finish. And at exactly 8:30 on the Sunday morning, the lights turned green once more to signal the start of the final day of the biggest rally raid race in Southern Africa. Both Woolridge and their NWM Ford Castrol Rangers were the first ones to drop the clutch, followed by a trio of TGRSA Hiluxes driven by Henk Lategan, Guy Bottrell and Janelle de Villiers. The race was on. But before we bring you the conclusion of the overall race, allow us to tell you the story of the race within a race, the so-called Road to Dakar. The local SARRC, or Rally Raid Championship, is one of, if not the strongest national championships on the planet. So it's no surprise that South Africa and the South Africans in particular are major players each year when it comes to the world's toughest race. Each year there are several South African drivers and navigators competing at the Dakar, with even more cars and crews from local soil making their mark on the world stage. With that in mind, the Dakar organizers host a race within a race, the Road to Dakar, right here at the Desert Race. Drivers and navigators who express interest to compete at Dakar, but have not yet been to Dakar, and that don't race in a factory team, are entered into the Road to Dakar. The winner gets a free entry into the Dakar prize with the price tag of around 600,000 Rand. In Zhuaneng, there were no less than 7 crews entered. The Ford Ranger of Vos Prinsloo, the CR6 of Dewald van Breda, the ZARRC of John Thompson, 3 Redline machines in the hands of Heinleins, Pim Klaassen and Nick Pinnar, and finally the SVR machine of youngster Jaden Els with Alvin Fonk reading the notes. The rules are simple. The highest placed finisher wins an entry to Dakar, and on this occasion, the prize went to Els and Fonk, who were no doubt delighted about their future Dakar prospects.
Yeah, no, it's nice. We pushed quite hard today, luckily no problems. Yeah, the team did an amazing job to get the car ready at 7 this morning. They worked right through the night.
But back to the race at hand, and the big question of who would be victorious at the 2023 TGRSA Desert Race. Unfortunately for Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen, they'd no longer take part in the race when a reoccurring technical issue once again forced their new Ranger to the sidelines. This left the door open for a massive battle further down the field between the likes of the popular Horn brothers from Malalan, then their Team Hilux Rally Raid Hilux, and Gary Berthold and Henry Cohn in their Toyota Hilux. And the Century CR6 expertly driven by Dewald Brunbreda and Stompie Maynard. The boys from Malalan had to contend with a time penalty, so they dropped down to 7th in the end, leaving Berthold to fight it out with the two-wheel drive CR6 machine of Van Breda. In the end, the old dog recorded yet another desert race finish, bringing his total tally of finishes on this tough race to way more than 20. But it was still only good enough for 2nd in class, as Van Breda drove a clean and consistent race to bring the big CR6 home in a fine 5th position. We are now nearing the business end of the race with a lone Redline Revo, no less than 4 official factory TGRSA Hiluxes and the 2 NWM Ford Castrol Rangers of the Woolridges still all fighting for the top few spots. The math was easy. There were still 7 cars in the fight, but only 4 positions left. Someone was going to lose out. A great battle developed between 17-year-old Sahud Variawa and Donnie Stassen in the TGRSA Hilux, and the older Chris Visser and Blikkies Venter in their Redline Revo. Variawa is a young prodigy who showed amazing pace in only his first ever national, but Visser is a wily old fox with several desert race victories and titles under his belt. On this occasion, it ended in tears for both drivers. The youngster was caught in the dust of the experienced Visser, and when the dust briefly settled at one of the many road crossings along the route, there was contact between the Redline Revo and the Hilux, bringing an end to both their races. The Revo sustained too much damage to continue, while rules state that an incident like this one carries a severe penalty, so Variawa was excluded from the results. One Hilux gone, but a few still remained, such as the one driven by defending desert race champions Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy. It was a frustrating race for the former Dakar winner, who lost time on Saturday and simply couldn't do anything about his overall position on the Sunday. The gap was too big, and the man from Stellenbosch had to settle for a 4th place finish. With de Villiers relegated to 4th, it meant that teammates Guy Bottrell and Simon Vasey-Lyle were on course for a career-best finish at the desert race. The multiple rally champion had shown his versatility since moving to the sport of rally raid racing, and on this event the Italian was both fast and consistent, despite doing around 200 kilometers of the race with very limited visibility thanks to a broken windscreen. And then it all came down to this: Henk Laertigan and Brett Cummings in the red corner against the 2 crews in the blue corner, Lance Woolridge and Kenny Gilbert, and Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer. Laertigan had it all to do, but in order for the multiple SA champion to win the race for his sponsors Toyota, it meant that he had to pass both the 4s on the day and on the road. A tough ask, to say the least. And then the sponsor's curse struck as the Hilux slowed to a stop thanks to a broken drive shaft causing damage to the wheel bearings. It was all over bar the shouting, and Toyota's hopes of fighting for a victory were gone. In the end, it probably wouldn't have made a difference anyway, because the boys in blue put in a faultless performance on the day. The Rangers didn't miss a beat throughout the race, and in the end, the race turned into a heated battle between the 2 brothers instead. Lance got the first punch in with his victory during the qualifying race on the Friday, but since then, it's all been about Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer. History was made when they claimed the top 2 steps of the podium, adding the Woolridge name once more to the winners list after their father Neil was also victorious in Botswana on 3 previous occasions. And there it is, a historical moment for the Woolridges, who took 1st and 2nd on their rivals Eventia in Botswana. Bottrell claimed 3rd for sponsors Toyota, with de Villiers 4th and Van Breda rounding up the top 5. But this was the moment that Ford fans and every member of the Woolridge family would cherish for a long time to come. A first and second place finish after 1,000 kilometers of the famous Toyota Desert Race.
Yeah, it's taken a long while. We've been plugging at it, but we finally had the weapon to do it today. And yeah, the car was unbelievable and really, really chuffed. It was quite an emotional finish, I must say. The whole last lap, Boyd and I we're quite on edge, just hoping that everything is fine and we get to the end. You start hearing noises you shouldn't, and yeah, Dad was over the moon, the team were in tears, so it's really fantastic.
It's good for Ford, a 1-2, it's definitely what we needed.
And that, as they say, is that. The end of an epic 2023 TGRSA 1000 Kalahari Botswana Desert Race. In a sense, it feels as if though the season has come to an end. Such was the scale of this year's race in Zwaneng. But in truth, 4 more rounds remain in the 2023 SARRC, and all that action will also be brought to you by Toyota, Ford and Pirelli.